Life has a way of weaving connections that feel both comforting and complex. Relationships, whether fleeting or long-lasting, leave their mark, and sometimes silence becomes the loudest echo of what was once shared. Today, I want to explore why someone might test you after a period of no contact and what it truly means for both of you. When two people enter a period of no contact, it's rarely a simple or straightforward experience. In two things that you said, Stephen, Amy, one of the things I really like that you said is that there's no shame. No contact is often the result of emotional turbulence, arguments, misunderstandings, or even the recognition that time and space are necessary for individual growth. Regardless of the reason, this gap between communication can be deeply transformative for both individuals involved. It becomes a time where emotions simmer, perspectives shift, and personal reflections unfold. The gap is not just a void where words are absent. It's a fertile ground for emotions to take root. It's a space where questions like, what went wrong and do they still care, often linger. For the person initiating contact after this silence, there's an inherent vulnerability. They're not just reaching out, they're stepping into the unknown. This gap may have created a chasm between what was and what now is, and they need to figure out if that chasm is navigable or if it has grown too wide to cross. On the other side, the person being contacted after the silence often feels a complex swirl of emotions too. They may have moved on, healed, or even built a stronger sense of self in that time. Alternatively, they might still feel hurt, uncertain, or longing for resolution. Regardless, the gap becomes a period where both parties inevitably build narratives. They fill in the silence with their assumptions, hopes, or fears, and these narratives may or may not align with reality. When someone tests you after no contact, they're trying to understand how the gap has changed you. They want to see if you're still the same person they left behind, or if the absence has reshaped you into someone new. Perhaps they're afraid you've moved on, or maybe they fear they've lost the connection they once cherished. In this sense, their testing becomes less about you and more about their need to find footing in what feels like uncertain terrain. It's crucial to recognize that the gap is transformative for everyone involved. Time apart can heal wounds, but it can also amplify insecurities. It can create clarity, but it can also stir confusion. Understanding this dynamic is key to making sense of why someone might test you when they return. Their actions are an attempt to bridge the gap, not necessarily because they're doubting you, but because they're doubting whether the connection they remember can still exist in the present. Emotional vulnerability lies at the very heart of why someone might test you after no contact. Vulnerability is often seen as a weakness, but in truth, it's one of the most profound expressions of strength. To open yourself up to another person, especially after a period of silence, requires courage, trust, and an acknowledgement of your own fears and insecurities. When someone reinitiates contact, they are stepping into a delicate space of emotional exposure, and testing you may be their way of shielding themselves from potential pain. To understand this, we must first recognize what vulnerability really means. It's the willingness to show up, to be seen as you truly are, and to risk rejection or misunderstanding. For the person reaching out, this act of testing is often a protective mechanism. It allows them to cautiously explore whether it's safe to invest their emotions again. They might ask probing questions, gauge your reactions, or even challenge your boundaries, not because they want to manipulate you, but because they're trying to protect their heart from further hurt. After a period of no contact, emotional vulnerability is heightened on both sides. For the person being tested, the situation can evoke feelings of confusion, frustration, or even defensiveness. You may find yourself wondering, why do I have to prove myself? Or why can't they just be direct about what they want? These reactions are valid, but it's important to remember that testing often stems from the other person's internal struggles. They may be dealing with unresolved fears. Fear that you've moved on, fear that you no longer care, or fear that the relationship they remember has fundamentally changed. For the person doing the testing, emotional vulnerability can feel like walking a tightrope. They might want to reconnect but feel unsure of how to express it directly. Testing becomes a way to feel out the situation without fully laying their emotions bare. It's as if they're saying, if I poke and prod gently enough, maybe I can understand where I stand without risking too much. While this approach isn't always healthy, it's often rooted in a very human need to protect oneself from rejection or disappointment. What makes emotional vulnerability so powerful is that it creates opportunities for genuine connection. When someone tests you, it's an invitation, albeit an indirect one, to show them who you are now. It's a chance to demonstrate authenticity, kindness, and boundaries all at once. But it's also an opportunity for self-reflection. How do you want to respond? Are you willing to meet their vulnerability with compassion, or do you feel the need to assert your own boundaries more firmly? It's also worth noting that vulnerability is a two-way street. While someone else's testing may reflect their fears, it can also trigger your own. Maybe you're afraid of being hurt again, or perhaps you feel uncertain about the future of the connection. Acknowledging your own emotional vulnerability is crucial. It allows you to approach the situation with honesty and self-awareness, ensuring that your responses are grounded in what's best for your emotional well-being. Ultimately, emotional vulnerability is not about exposing yourself recklessly or allowing others to dictate your worth. It's about embracing the truth of where you are and what you need while respecting the other person's journey. When faced with tests after no contact, remember that vulnerability, when balanced with strength and clarity, can transform an uncertain moment into a meaningful one. By choosing to lead with authenticity, you not only honor your own growth, but also create space for a connection built on honesty, understanding, and mutual respect. In relationships, patterns are like the threads woven through a tapestry. They define the structure, shape the dynamics, and reveal the essence of the connection. When someone tests you after a period of no contact, it's rarely an isolated event. More often than not, their behavior is rooted in a pattern that has shaped your interactions before. Understanding these patterns is key to navigating the situation effectively and deciding whether it aligns with who you are now. Patterns in relationships are formed over time through repeated behaviors, reactions, and expectations. These patterns might include the way you handle conflict, the roles you assume in the relationship, or the ways you communicate and seek validation. Some patterns are healthy, fostering trust and growth, while others may be detrimental, leading to cycles of misunderstanding, frustration, or hurt. When someone re-enters your life after no contact, they don't come back as a blank slate. They bring with them the patterns you both established before the silence. Testing, in this context, is often an attempt to see if those patterns still hold true. For instance, if your relationship was defined by one person constantly seeking reassurance and the other providing it, their testing might be a way to gauge if you'll still play that role. If one of you tended to dominate conversations or avoid emotional depth, those tendencies might resurface as well. Recognizing these patterns gives you a tremendous amount of insight. It allows you to see the situation not just as an isolated moment, but as part of a broader narrative. You might ask yourself, Does this behavior feel familiar? Am I being drawn into a cycle I've seen before? Have I grown in ways that make this pattern less appealing or sustainable for me? The power of patterns lies in their ability to predict behavior. However, it's also important to remember that patterns are not set in stone. They can be broken, reshaped, and replaced with healthier dynamics if both people are willing to put in the effort. This is especially true after a period of no contact, which often serves as a reset button. The silence can give both parties the space to reflect on what worked, what didn't, and what they're willing to change. But breaking unhealthy patterns isn't easy. It requires a conscious effort to communicate differently, set clearer boundaries, and approach the relationship with a fresh perspective. For example, if testing was previously met with appeasement or over-explanation, you might choose instead to respond with calm clarity and firm boundaries. If avoidance was a recurring theme, you might now prioritize honest and open conversations. It's also worth noting that patterns often reflect deeper emotional needs. Someone who tests you may be seeking reassurance, security, or control, even if they're not fully aware of it. By identifying the underlying need, you can decide how or if you want to address it. Sometimes the healthiest response is to set boundaries and protect your own emotional well-being, especially if the pattern feels toxic or unsustainable. However, not all patterns are negative. Some might remind you of why the connection was meaningful in the first place. For example, if your dynamic was built on mutual support and respect, testing might simply be a way for the other person to reconnect with those positive aspects. In these cases, acknowledging the pattern can help you strengthen the bond in a way that feels authentic and affirming. Ultimately, the power of patterns lies in their ability to illuminate the past and guide the future. By understanding the dynamics that shaped your relationship before no contact, you gain clarity about what you want to carry forward and what you're ready to leave behind. Patterns can teach you about yourself, your triggers, your strengths, and your boundaries. They can also serve as a reminder that while the past shapes us, it doesn't have to define us. With awareness, intention, and courage, you can step into any situation with the confidence to create a connection that aligns with the person you've become. When someone tests you after a period of no contact, their behavior often reflects more than their immediate intentions or insecurities. It acts as a mirror. This mirror not only reveals their emotional state, but also provides valuable insights into your own growth, boundaries, and priorities. Understanding this dynamic is key to navigating these tests with clarity and purpose. At its core, a test is rarely just about you. It's often a projection of the other person's internal fears, hopes, and uncertainties. When someone re-enters your life, they might test you to gauge where they stand or to validate their assumptions about the connection you once shared. They might ask loaded questions, make ambiguous comments, or observe your reactions to see if the dynamic feels familiar. This behavior is a reflection of their inner dialogue. Are we still the same? Has anything changed? Do I still matter to them? In this way, their testing is like a flashlight shining on the parts of themselves that remain unresolved. It reveals their insecurities, perhaps fear of rejection, guilt over the silence, or uncertainty about how to rebuild trust. For example, a person who tests by acting distant might be trying to protect themselves from potential disappointment, assuming you'll reject them first. On the other hand, someone who pushes boundaries may be seeking reassurance that you still care or that the connection holds the same importance as it once did. However, the test isn't just about their reflection. It also becomes a mirror for you. How you respond or choose not to respond sheds light on your own emotional state and personal growth. These moments of testing can reveal whether you've moved forward, healed, or developed healthier boundaries during the time apart. For instance, if their testing triggers frustration or defensiveness in you, it might indicate unresolved feelings or a need for stronger boundaries. If you find yourself tempted to over-explain or accommodate their behavior, it might highlight patterns of people-pleasing or a fear of conflict. Conversely, if you're able to respond calmly and authentically, it's a sign that you've embraced a sense of self-worth and clarity about what you want in relationship. The mirror of testing also challenges you to reflect on the past patterns of your relationship. Did you often feel the need to prove yourself or validate the other person's emotions? Did you tolerate behavior that made you uncomfortable to avoid confrontation? These tests are an opportunity to pause and ask, am I still operating from old habits? Or have I grown into someone who approaches relationships with greater self-awareness and confidence? In many ways, testing becomes a pivotal moment of choice. You have the chance to decide whether to re-engage in old dynamics or establish a new foundation based on mutual respect and understanding. Recognizing the test as a mirror can shift your perspective from one of frustration to one of empowerment. Instead of seeing their behavior as a challenge to overcome, you can view it as an invitation to reaffirm your values and boundaries. It's also worth noting that mirrors don't lie, but they don't always show the full picture. The reflection you see in someone's test is only part of the story. While their behavior may reveal their fears or desires, it's important to approach the situation with empathy and curiosity rather than making assumptions. Ask yourself, what might they be feeling right now? How can I respond in a way that's authentic to me, but also compassionate toward them? Remember that not all reflections need to be engaged with, just as you wouldn't stand in front of a cracked or distorted mirror and expect a true reflection. You don't have to internalize or respond to every test. Some behaviors might reflect their issues more than yours, and it's okay to step away from dynamics that feel unhealthy or draining. The test as a mirror is a powerful metaphor for relationships because it emphasizes growth and self-awareness. These moments of testing, while challenging, offer a rare opportunity to learn more about yourself and the other person. By approaching these situations with intention, you can navigate them in a way that strengthens your sense of self and, if appropriate, rebuilds the connection on a healthier foundation. After all, the most meaningful relationships are those where both people can look in the mirror and see reflections they're proud of. When someone tests you after a period of no contact, it can feel unsettling. Their behavior might leave you questioning their intentions, the state of your relationship, or even your own emotions. However, responding with strength doesn't mean reacting with force or defensiveness. It means grounding yourself in clarity, authenticity, and self-respect. It's about choosing actions and words that honor the person you've become, regardless of how the other person approaches the situation. Strength begins with self-awareness. Before you respond to any test, take a moment to reflect on your emotions. Are you feeling hurt, confused, or frustrated? Are you tempted to prove something, explain yourself, or win their approval? These initial reactions are natural, but responding with strength means pausing to process them rather than acting impulsively. Strength is not about suppressing emotions. It's about understanding them and choosing how to express them in a way that aligns with your values. A key part of responding with strength is setting and maintaining boundaries. Tests often push the limits of your comfort zone, whether it's through probing questions, ambiguous comments, or behaviors that challenge your sense of security. When this happens, it's important to be clear about what you're willing to tolerate and what you're not. For example, if someone tests you by bringing up past issues in a way that feels unfair or manipulative, you might calmly say, "I'd prefer to focus on the present rather than rehashing old conflicts. Let's talk about how we can move forward instead." Boundaries aren't just about protecting yourself, they're also about communicating your expectations clearly. When you respond with strength, you show the other person that you value mutual respect and honesty in your interactions. This can help shift the dynamic away from testing and toward more open and constructive communication. Another aspect of responding with strength is choosing authenticity over performance. Tests often come with an unspoken invitation to prove yourself, whether it's through your words, actions, or reactions. However, strength means resisting the urge to perform or seek validation. Instead, focus on being honest about who you are and what you need. For instance, if someone tests your loyalty by making a vague or indirect comment, you don't have to engage in their game. You can simply say, "If there's something you'd like to ask me, I'd appreciate it if you were direct. I value clear communication." Authenticity also involves being honest with yourself about whether the relationship is worth re-engaging in. Sometimes tests reveal deeper issues that may not align with the kind of connection you want to build. Responding with strength might mean walking away if the dynamic feels unhealthy, or if their behavior reflects unresolved patterns that you're no longer willing to participate in. Strength doesn't always mean staying and fixing. Sometimes it means choosing to protect your peace and prioritizing your well-being. Compassion is another powerful component of responding with strength. While it's important to stand firm in your boundaries, it's equally important to approach the other person with empathy. Testing behavior often stems from fear, insecurity, or a desire for reassurance. Recognizing this can help you respond in a way that's both firm and kind. For example, if someone tests your commitment by questioning your intentions, you might respond with something like, "I understand,